I have been working with scent in my practice for over 30 years. For this exhibition, I'm exhibiting a new work made for the show titled Terrain Denial. On the question of whether or not my work targets individual or collective sensory experience, I would probably say both.
For the exhibition Odor, I present an artwork that is called A Tale of Forked Tongues. And it is. I thought of this artwork in between 2018 and 2022. And the sculpture is a smell. I started working with smell unintentionally, I have to say, at the beginning of the 90s, when I used some food in my projects. So that means that inevitably the space was filled with smell.
I commit myself to the topic beginning of the 90s. On my journey to commit to the topic, I studied multiple topics for the purpose to understand this invisible reality that surrounds me all the time, full time. I was aware of breathing and air very early in my life, like all of us, but growing up in the Northern Hemisphere, spending a lot of time outdoor, I got very early aware of its importance, that a molecule that entered my system did something to me beyond my control. And this was what made me also even more committed to find out what does this air contain. It seemed to be important. It seemed to provide information that I'm not able to identify at this very moment, but there may be a way to find out what it is, and that's the starting point for me looking into the topic of air, movement, breathing, and on the top of all, smell molecules. And in the specific work here, I look into the molecules in the space, the work of the other. I collect all those molecules and mix it in my room and blow it out of the building.
I remember being the Goldsmith College doing my MA, and I come from a sculpture, but within my BA in sculpture and all that kind of things. But I was just a little bit, never have been that full convinced of the idea just one sense can actually communicate everything. And in my days at the university, I did my first pieces with smell. I failed. We could put too much smell or little smell. I didn't know how to control that. So I decided to make more studies, and I enrolled in a course in Kanush in India, a place that has more than 300 years producing perfume and spices all over the world. So exciting, see the world, how it's made, and the whole spectrum.
Yo empecé a trabajar con el olor, creo que desde el inicio de mi carrera, cuando la empiezo a hacer pública, ¿no? 1990. Es cuando empiezo. Para mí es importante, ha sido siempre importante el olor, por lo que significa, ¿no? Esa parte de la memoria que te genera el olor. La pieza se llama Periferia de la Agonía y es del 2003.
I'm interested in smell as using the smell as an object. An object that means that the smell becomes a sculpture. Of course, this kind of sculpture disrupting the conventional idea of the sculpture because it is an object in the space like a sculpture, but invisible. is not visible. Because we are surrounded by smell, and the world is did by smell, and then therefore why we can't use the smell as an object, and in that case the object is a sculpture and the smell becomes a sculpture.
Starting point in all my work is the present, yeah? But the present is also the past. So the air we all are surrounded with contain molecules that was contributed by generations ago of living matter. So the first molecule on planet Earth was produced by bacteria for the purpose to communicate information, and this is still the case. So all that masses of air, molecules surrounding us all the time emit from smell sources. These smell sources are the starting point for all of my work.
Pienso que mostrar el cuerpo, mostrar la imagen del cadáver, lo que hace es rechazarla, te saca de la poesía. Sin embargo, a partir del olor, te lleva a una realidad más profunda que si lo estuvieras viendo el cuerpo. Por eso es que trabajo con lo que toca la periferia del cadáver, no con el cadáver en sí, sino con la periferia, y en este caso la periferia es el olor.
The perception of odors is more overtly subjective than perception in other sensory modalities, so it is more difficult to predict or control what an audience might perceive. So, for example, if I pointed to something like a lemon, we would pretty much agree on the color of it being yellow. We could say it's yellow. With scent, it's different. We don't have the same vocabulary. So if I gave you a bottle of lemon essential oil, you might say it smells like a lemon. The language is quite crude and connected to the fruit or the object itself, rather than a word for the sensation which we have for the visual. Yellow. Yellow isn't an object or a fruit, it's a word. And it's a word that describes a visual sensation. You might also, for example, describe the lemon essential oil as pleasant or unpleasant, or you might not guess that it's lemon at all, which is very common. You might say it smells like hand sanitizer or a kind of chewing gum. Or you might even describe a memory that the scent evokes. So when I work with fragrance, I have to take all of this into consideration when developing the work. And I like to play with it and have fun.
The word consciousness is to be aware of what is happening around us. And consciousness and the negation of is not be aware. So, if you open the first page on the newspaper, be Guardian, New York Times, or any kind of newspaper, País in Spain, whatever, Russia and Ukraine. More arms don't solve the problem. The same victims, humans. Not the oligarchs, the poor ones. Peace is what solves the problem, but it's not sound like it will be peace. And generating more migrations. Second article on the newspaper, we have now the UN Climate Change Summit. The result is not too positive. We expect a more global fossil fuel emission higher than before. Climate change, more migration. But all this thing bring the complexity of the world and the complexity of migration. I wanted to see the positive sides of migration, and smell is a good medium to talk about that. The history of smell. If you remember the history of spices, the history of the soap was thanks to migrations and come from another part of the world. Cristoforo Colombo went to India looking for spices, ending in America.
In general, the skill of smell is to activate your emotional intelligence, So it's literally information for the emotional intelligence of the brain. And what happened in that moment when you perceive a smell, individually you activate what is already stored in your subconsciousness. So everyone reacts to a smell differently. So there's something called individual memory, but there's also something called collective memory. There are smells that we all remember the same thing towards.
Memories and emotions interest me in relation to the subject of my research and the works that arise from this research. Emotions are those related to the viewing of a work and the emotions we experience when visiting a museum, for example. In this case, since it is a smell, that the work can also be seen with eyes closed. I believe that every collective experiences is also individual, and that the individual experience can be shared with other people. I believe that when you work on a work, you always think of it for one or more people. But this changes especially for the space in which you work.
Y en América Latina, y que vivimos en esta eterna guerra, en México, Colombia, El Salvador, de alguna manera te vas acostumbrando a ver las imágenes por la televisión, el cadáver por la televisión, por los medios, por el periódico, por la prensa. Y te da esa distancia porque no hueles, solamente ves la imagen, ves el cuerpo muerto, pero no lo sientes a través del olfato. Para mí es muy importante que ese olfato te genere, que te lleve directamente a la realidad. O sea, la muerte es real, no es una imagen, es real, y para mí la realidad te lo da el olfato.
I keep a scent diary where I record my impressions, as well as a notebook with formulas. I also try to keep notes of other people's impressions when I experiment with something new. I collect both commercial fragrances, olfactory materials such as essential oils and chemicals, as well as objects or materials I find interesting on an olfactory level. As much as possible, I try to make the scents myself. In my studio, I have a section that a friend jokingly nicknamed the Breaking Bad area after the American television series. And that section is mostly lab equipment. I think of fragrance as a material, and I treat it as such. Sometimes I need specialist advice and equipment, so I go to the university where I work and get that. More recently, I have experimented with working with perfumers, but I am still trying to find a way of doing this that works for me, as our aims or goals are often very different. And it requires time to work well and develop a good working relationship.
Since I started to think of smell as a sculpture and to think of a smell in reference to an object or theme that doesn't have has a smell, I need to collaborate with the nose. And for the Bienna, that was my first time, I met Maria Candida Gentile, with whom I got on so well that I no longer had the desire, the wish, to work with others. We have now reached on our fourth project with the last one for Odor, and I'm happy with this collaboration with Maria Candida Gentile.
At the very beginning, I was aware of the knowledge exists beyond this little, my kitchen, let's put it like that. So I was kind of very committed to get access to the entire knowledge very soon in my career, to see what can I do with it and how can I collaborate with the knowledge on its own terms, or on its own condition. So long story short, I was lucky to be collaborating with or getting support from the biggest company in the world that did research and developed smell molecules, in a big scale.
For this project, I have been focused, as I say, it's in a composition in 3 notes. I work with raw materials. And I like to make celebrations of migration, celebration of the movement. And one of the centerpiece of the smell is it's a 3D named Myroxylon balsamum. And when the Spaniards arrived in Central America, Maya people, mainly in Salvador, they was used as a medicine. So they took it to Spain, to Europe, that we use it here in Europe, and they took as well to China. So this smell has been traveling for centuries. I hope this kind of work and working with smell always have that kind of question in the back of my head. Can a smell be simple to explain complex? Because through the smell, we talk about migration, we need to talk about corruption, we need to talk about ethic. How ethical is the business of a smell? How much play and conscience, or we don't know how so many polymers go into the water. So all the chemical things we use it's a moment we need to rethinking and all the things. And I don't have the answers for that, but I don't think the smell as a one sense can solve the problem.
Inicialmente trabajaba y visitaba morgues, depósitos de cadáveres. Ahora actualmente trabajo mucho en la calle, en el lugar, en el origen del crimen o del asesinato. Entonces voy a los espacios donde suceden, en el lugar de los hechos, es donde trabajo.
In 2013, for the Venice Biennale, I thought to present a sculpture using a smell. For the topic was perfect for me to think the smell as a perfect object as a sculpture. But the object that I thought, the Eternit, has no smell. So in that time I start to think the smell as a sculpture. And for that project I asked to Maria Candida Gentile to help me to produce the smell or of something that has no smell. We work in the visual arts, and culturally we have been used to seeing something as a work of art for centuries, so we need to see an object. If we put an image together with smell, inevitably think of that image as the main element of the work, and smell is relegated as an accessory. It results only an ornament. In contrast, for my work, the main material of the sculpture is invisible because it is simply a smell.
I mean, if there is nothing, air is always there, you know? So the biggest host of architecture is air. And this is what my work is about. If there's no one, there's nothing, there's still air. And that air, as I said, is a shared endeavor, and that's incredible. We all contribute to it, and I want to give homage to that fact. So breathing is important. Let's breathe in and breathe out and reflect on that process. What molecules comes into your system? What does it do with you? In deep dive on your subconsciousness, in activating your memory and your emotion. And that is such a beautiful moment. So what is so amazing with this exhibition is all these in-between spaces that you can actually reflect on what just happened.
One of the things I most enjoy about working with scent in an exhibition space is the way that it can make you pay attention to the neglected and invisible. It also allows you to take things out of context and recontextualize it. In my earlier work from the 90s, I worked with nothing in the room apart from the scent and a title. At the time, this was quite challenging for an audience to go to a seemingly empty gallery. The other thing I enjoy is how scent simultaneously takes up space, but also does not take up space.